The topic I'm going to choose today, or the one I've chosen today, is to do a case study of a case study. We wanted to speak to e-commerce store owners running their own ads between 1 to 2 million in revenue, generating over 15 million. This was mind-blowing for us, let alone a prospect. But the ultimate goal was to kind of bring them through on this landing page experience. Hey guys, welcome to today's coaching call within Elite. The topic I'm going to choose today, or the one I've chosen today, is to do a case study of a case study. So one of the common questions I've had recently is, I want to get more leads into my agency or into my freelance business. What are the different ways I can do it? Now, I'm going to share with you one of the ways that I did it for my agency back in 2019, and it's a funnel that absolutely crushed for us. It worked so well that we didn't need anything on top of it. It's not the only way to do things, but I want to show you this method in terms of how we produced the funnel, the lead magnet, and drew people into our agency to give you some insight into kind of how you can tackle your next lead gen campaign as well. So when we talk about lead gen for agencies, there's many different ways that you can approach this. It could be something you give away for free, and then you get the lead and you try and get them to book a call. It could be something that you sell for low ticket and then try and nurture them and get them into a call. It could just be direct and say, hey, with this agency, we've got this promotion, come and speak to us. There's lots and lots of different ways. There's referrals, there's going after cold traffic, warm traffic. And for me to cover that off in a 20 minutes video would be quite something. But what I do want to cover off today is this case study here. So it's the 21x case study. It's something we published in 2019 following some really big success in 2018 with campaign budget optimization. So it's the first time in 2018 that we were playing around with CBO. It worked for a client. It absolutely crushed. We started to run it for a few different clients and it worked really well. But that's not the thing that I want to share with you. What I want to share with you is when we put this case study together, we asked the question, how do we get more clients like this? So the client that we started working with in the summer of 2018 had so many good things going for them. So we use methodology called the core four, so the advertising core four, where we look at 4 parts of the prospect's business. So their product, their audience, their offer, and their funnel. This client was looking really good when they approached us. They were doing 1 to 2 million a year, but the founder who was running the ads was struggling to kind of break through to the next level. How do I take this to 4 million, to 6 million? That was his ambitious goal. So he came in and said, hey, I've taken it this far. I need to figure out how to get to the next level. They were speaking to us as well as other agencies. And when we looked at what they had and we scaled them on the AC4, the advertising core 4, we found that they were in a really strong position. So the product was extremely well received and filled a good gap in the marketplace. They had a okay understanding of who their audience was. Their funnel was converting really well. So this was an average order value of maybe $100 to $120, converting at 2 to 2.5%. So for that average order value, it was good. So it was an e-commerce client, but their offer, their messaging and stuff, it wasn't as good as it should be. So we looked at this and said, we believe we can do a good job. Roll forward 5 months from them joining. I think by that 5 or 7 month period, we'd actually generated $16 million of revenue in that period of time. So not only did we break through their goals of trying to get past 2 or 3 million a year, we've actually done far more, 10 times more than they expected in 7 months. We could turn around and say, hey, we're an amazing agency and we're so great at Facebook ads. But the reality was we were working with our perfect client. So then we kind of looked at that months after we'd kind of started to realize how powerful our methodologies were for this specific type of client. When you're an agency owner and you're thinking about who do I want to work with, unless you can be very clear about who that prospect is, often you need to kind of readjust your strategies, your onboarding, your testing, scaling, because one client might be spending $100 a day, another client spending $1,000, another client spending $10,000 a day. How you approach those in the first few weeks is going to be quite different. This client came in and said, I think they were spending between $1,500 and $2,000 a day. So they came in at a level where they were already running profitable ads. They had great customer testimonials. They had a good customer service team. They had really great photography, videography. The website was looking great. So we kind of looked at all those attributes and said, we've got a proven formula for a client like this. We're running on a few other clients as well. How do we attract more clients exactly the same as this where we can literally copy and paste our systems. And for me, that's one of the powerful parts of growing your agency is when you can create as many copy and paste systems as possible. That includes getting you out of the day-to-day. So if I go into 2018, 2019, I was still involved in the day-to-day. By 2021, I was barely involved. And it's the same principle. How do I replicate success? So we wanted a way of being able to bring in the perfect client in a way that really sped up the kind of know, like, and trust factor of SM commerce as an agency, because that's really what we wanted. We wanted more agency leads, but really high quality agency leads. I'm not going to start on the landing page. I'm going to start on this 5W avatar document because this is where we started. So when we look at kind of who are we speaking to, we wanted to speak to e-commerce store owners that were running, and I'm trying to type this while I'm talking as well, running their own ads and were doing between 1 to 2 million in revenue with profits, let's just say. So that's kind of who we wanted to speak to. This was our ideal avatar, because what we found was if the e-commerce store owners running their own ads, they have a strong understanding of the things that we'll be talking to them. So if you imagine a business owner that comes to you and says, hey, we want you to take over our ads, but agency of running it and we don't really like them, or someone in-house that don't, the business owner doesn't really understand your language. So you're going to have to approach things quite differently. And that's why we were specifically after these e-commerce store owners that were running their own ads. And there are many, many people like that. So they've gone from 0 to 7 figures and they've scaled it and they've been learning Facebook ads as they've gone along. So they're essentially learning our language. So we knew there wasn't an issue about the kind of technicalities and things we were talking about. And remember that, because that's what we actually applied into our case study as well. And we found that this kind of sweet spot of already achieved 7 figures, 1 to 2 million level, that was a sweet spot for the kind of e-commerce store that we were after as well. And what was the transformation? So when we build our avatar, these are the things we're asking. Who are we speaking to? And what's the, you were here and we're going to take you there transformation that we're offering? And for these folk, it was scale to 8 figures. That was literally our motivation for those prospects. So if we were going to be speaking to these store owners and they're doing 1 to 2 million and they said, we'd just like to maintain where we're at, want to increase profits, but we're happy at doing $1 to $2 million a year. That wasn't our ideal prospect. We wanted those ambitious e-commerce store owners that wanted to get from 1 to 2 million to 10 million plus. That's the path that we'd created. That's the process that we wanted to sell into them and the service we wanted to offer. So then we started off with this as a base and said, right, where are they right now? And when I build an avatar, I'm looking at all of these different elements of Maslow's hierarchy to look at where they are as an individual. Because if I'm building an avatar, essentially it's a view of a person. You can have multiple avatars for a product. So for example, we have multiple avatars of our agency. This is just one prospect avatar that we wanted to go deeply after, which we did in 2019. So we looked at this and said, what's their emotional state right now? So for many of them, they were completely overwhelmed. Because if you imagine you're running an e-com store, you've hit 1 to 2 million, you're running the ads, you're probably dabbling in some of the customer service and fulfillment and products development and things like that, which is what this client was doing. And we kind of had a good idea that that's kind of what these e-com store owners were going through. So if you think about the emotional states they're going through, they are stressed because they're managing so much. They're anxious because Facebook, in many cases, that's what we offered predominantly then as a service. Facebook was driving 90% or more of their revenue. So there's anxiety. What if something goes wrong? What if Facebook does this? What if I do that? And just like this store owner, they'd be looking at multiple Facebook groups, trying to find new tactics and ideas. And that's how he connected to me initially. But there's that kind of stress and anxiety part that comes into it. And also, if you project forward to where they want to be, they want to run the business. They want a successful business that doesn't rely on them, that creates profit, that creates time freedom. So all these emotional states came in where we were trying to play with what the reasons why someone would consider our agency and how can we show that we know the path and actually can deliver what they need. And then we go into the benefits of working with us as an agency. We know how to scale. We've walked the path. We've taken multiple businesses from 1 to 2 million to 10 million plus with the 8-figure agency. We understand Facebook. We've got connections with Facebook. So they're all the kind of the functional and logical reasons to work with us. And then we worked on the barriers. So, okay, so if someone's interested in us, what would hold them back from potentially working with SM Commerce? Then we started to list those out. Once we'd completed this activity, Then we started writing down the elements of the case study. And literally these bullet points here, this is the original Word doc from 2020, where we actually started to put together the bullet points of what we're actually going to start to publish out. Because this is what it started with. It was, we understand our avatar, but what are we actually going to cover that's going to be motivating for our prospects? So here's a lowdown of what we achieved, $7 million plus revenue in ad spend, which, by the way, although we did that, feedback was it just felt unrealistic. So to spend $340,000 in ad spend and get a 7 million return, even though we did that, had the screenshots, had the proof, it still felt unrealistic. So that's just something to bear in mind of where your potential prospect is right now, what the realistic hooks that you can work on, turning 5K to 240K in a sales revenue, generating over 15 million. Like this was mind-blowing for us, let alone a prospect. But what we did realize afterwards, even though this was a successful case study, some of these numbers seemed a bit too far out there. So just imagine when you're building your avatar, where is your prospect at right now? And what's the kind of next 2-3 levels that they want to reach to? And then we start to summarize. So before we'd even written the case study, we started off with a summary. We spent quite a few days working on this. And then we started to work on, right, what do we actually want to share with them? So we then worked on the titles for each of the sections to step people through it. Now, bear in mind, when we created this document, it's been through a number of different iterations. So this 2020 version was to actually push people from the 21X case study into the BPM method training calls. The original version was to push someone from the case study into the agency. And this is an example of where you can reuse case studies depending on what service or product you're offering as well. So we went through this and started to kind of fill out the details of stepping people through the big kind of aha moments or the wow moments as they read through it to try and get them into understanding how we did it. But here's the key thing. We were originally targeting an audience of e-commerce store owners that understood the lingo and the language of running Facebook ads, but didn't have the time to implement. So what we knew is, even though we focused heavily on what we did, and usually we don't really share the how, because that's kind of how we sell our services, we did show the how in this as well. So we actually broke down the process quite in some detail so that when an e-commerce store owner read this, they not only knew that the person that wrote this knew what they were doing, and there was proof that we understood as an agency what we had done, but we were giving away the keys to the kingdom as well. So they would read through this and to an extent be overwhelmed, because there's no way a busy e-commerce store owner that wants to grow from 1 to 2 million, that's already struggling for time and cash freedom, is going to have the time to go through this properly. And that's part of the reason why we managed to generate a good number of quality calls off the back of this, because by the time those people actually went through it and you got to the end and said, who is this agency? What do they do? How is it relevant for me? All that kind of stuff. By the time they'd gone through and seen the website and contacted us, they were already selling themselves into working with us, and that made it easier for us to close. So when they got on the call and said, hey, you know, I've read the 21X case study, by the way, our CRM would know that they've downloaded it and seen it already. And then they say, I'm interested in your agency services. We go through a typical process of saying, where are you at right now? Where do you want to get to? What's stopping you? And things like that. The prospects that came in were desperate to work with us. And that was one of the biggest differences between running other forms of lead magnet and this particular strategy and recipe, was that we were getting them to self-select. We were getting them to go through the case study and essentially filter out people that would maybe look at this and say, it's not quite right for me, or even people that have time that would go through and just implement it themselves. Again, they're not right for our agency. So this is as much about filtering out as it is about filtering in. And then obviously, once they've downloaded the lead magnet, then you build your email flows. And we had multiple email flows built up for kind of different scenarios. And then kind of making sure as you're going through that process, you're reiterating the power of what you've done, what you can actually do for them, and some of the kind of key elements of what they can expect working with you as well. I didn't set this automation up, but it was all based on, have they done a key action? How far have they got through? Have they booked a call? Things like that. But the ultimate goal was to kind of bring them through on this landing page experience. So if I touch back on the landing page, it was really designed to share some information of what was going to be in the PDF. So what I've showed you here is the Word document version, which eventually became a PDF. This was a teaser. So all the way through from seeing the ad that we ran to seeing the landing page and then getting the PDF, we're showing them that we have an abundance of sharing of giving and value, so that we're building reciprocity. So when they're going through this process and they're going through the landing page and seeing what we've got to give, and there's these calls to action to submit their email and get the PDF and things like that, every step we're giving them lots of value. So they're getting that kind of position already that these guys, this agency, they're giving away so much already. Just imagine if we could work with someone like this. And that was a key part of positioning this, so that we could actually go back to our avatar, understand how to pinpoint these people. And the ads were, again, using the same focus. So if we're going after these kind of e-com store owners, how do we start to pull these elements out into ads? So, hey, if you're a struggling agency owner stuck at 1 to 2 million in revenue and you're running ads, here's the path to get to 8 figures within 6 months or 12 months or something like that. So the ads don't have to work that hard just to get people into a landing page, which does the heavy lifting. Now, in some cases where I go into kind of heavy copy and long form copy in my ads, then my ads are doing the heavy lifting. But in this case, we used short form ads, which were there just to get the click out of Facebook for the ideal person. So at that point, we wouldn't know if they're the ideal prospect, but they might be a good potential. So they're in e-commerce. We targeted things like e-commerce and Shopify and things like that to get people into the landing page. And then once they'd landed here, get them to sign up if they didn't. There's some retargeting ads, obviously, to bring them through. And once they'd signed up, get them through our automation funnel and then get them to take a key action. And as I mentioned, we then repurposed this to go from pushing agency leads, because we couldn't take any more leads on, to then pushing them into other products. So it became an item that we could actually repurpose and reuse based on what was important to us at that moment in time. And actually, many years on from running this, we could literally turn this on at any point, start running that tap again, get those leads back in, and then turn it off. And that's actually how we ended up using this. Became our first main kind of lead or client attraction system for the agency. And in some ways, the last that we needed as well. We did run some others as well. And there are things that we can cover off in future coaching sessions. But essentially, this became our most successful. Just to share some numbers with you, the cost per lead on average for these leads was about £5, so GBP at that point. The clients that we generated off the back of this were paying a minimum between 20 and 30K to work with us. And then obviously, if you think about retainer and lifetime value and things like that, this was a hugely, hugely profitable process. Now, it's not to say that this is the only way to run your ads. It's not to say that this is the most profitable way to lead gen, but it absolutely worked for us. And it's these key elements as to why it worked. Now, I know from when we published this, I saw other people publishing similar case studies using the format and things like that. But I doubt, because this is the first time we've spoken about this, that people actually realized what went into it and who we were specifically targeting. So bear that in mind next time you see a funnel and you want to funnel hack it and literally copy and paste it. Think about what they're actually aiming for. Does that match what you're aiming for? And for me, that always starts with the 5W avatar and breaking down the exact profile of the person you want to bring in, their needs and desires, and matching that to what you can deliver, and then building the system that's going to hook them in. So for us, in this particular case, this case study fit in perfectly with that avatar. For a different avatar, then would maybe bring in a different funnel. It might not even be something like this. So for example, one of the funnels that worked well for us was when iOS 14.5 became a big thing, we created something called the FAT framework. We sold that as a product that would bring in paying leads. And on the thank you page, we had a strategy call option. So once you bought that product, you could book a call with us. And we used that to filter as to whether they were a good agency, a potential agency client or digital product or something else. So there's different ways you can filter and develop. But essentially, this remains to be our biggest driver of quality leads. And it all came about because we were super conscious about who we're targeting. And we went through, I think this case study probably took about 2 to 3 weeks to create between myself and the team to get to a level where we really nailed the avatar. So when the avatar went through it, they were bought in and they wanted to sell themselves into the agency. And just think about that. Through the sales process, we didn't really have to sell. The clients were desperate to work with us. They'd already seen this case study, other case studies that we delivered as part of the email flow and sharing some of the testimonials and different strategies and things like that. So all the selling had been done. By the point they'd got to the call, it was how much does it cost and can I get started? And that puts you in a massive position of power as the agency owner as well.